Shut up and sit down.
It's the Maryland Sports Blog Weekly Recap Show, hosted by Adam Gotkin.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to MSB Weekly. I'm your host, Adam Gotkin, joined alongside our Navy football writer, Bryan Powell. And today we're going to have a bit of a quick episode, even though it has been a bit of an exciting week. We're going to start off talking about baseball. And this week, the Orioles and Nationals both had pretty interesting weeks. The Orioles in their last three games are 2-3. They did win 3 out of 4 against the Yankees. This is a while ago. I'm looking on my notes wrong. They lost 3 out of 4 against the Rays. They've been struggling a bit recently, and if they want to make that playoff push, they're really going to have to improve. They're pretty far out now from the playoffs because Tampa Bay and the Yankees have both already clinched. And for the Orioles to really make it, I'm pretty sure they're going to have to go almost undefeated for the rest of the season. They started off so well, and since then, they just really haven't been that good. For the Nationals, on the other hand, they're completely awful. They passed that 19-31 mark this year. But the day we're recording this, they went 1-1 in the doubleheader, and they're just completely awful. Next season will be interesting. We'll see what Mike Rizzo does during the offseason, but the Nats are awful. The Orioles aren't playing well, and baseball in this area is just not doing good. And that's pretty much all I can say about it. There's not much more that can be said. It's just all of it's going bad. So, but, baseball wasn't that great, but something that was really good, Navy football. They had one hell of a comeback versus Tulane this past week. Bryan, can you tell us about the game?
Sure. Navy was down 24-0 at halftime after basically continuing what happened against BYU in terms of their performance. They started freshman Xavier Arline, who's only been in the system since August 21st, and he's actually a top 5 lacrosse player and came to Navy because they were one of those schools that was willing to let him play both sports. In the second half, actually at the end of the first half, Cam Kinley, senior cornerback for them that's actually the senior class president also, picked off a pass that on their own 3-yard line that would have made it 31-0 Tulane if they would have scored. But that kind of changed momentum in the second half. The defense got a couple 3-and-outs, and Navy got a couple touchdowns, and then to cut the lead to 24-14. And then Navy had a punt that was down on the 1-yard line of Tulane, which led to a safety to make it 24-16. And then midway through the second quarter, they brought in senior Dalen Morris to play quarterback, who started the opener and struggled in the first half before he was pulled. But he played well in this game because Navy realized they would have to throw the ball to back off the Tulane defense, who was crowding the box to try to stop the option. They ended up tying the game on a pass to Michael Cooper, and then got a 2-point conversion to tie it. And then Bijan Nichols, a sophomore kicker who's made several clutch game-winning field goals, including the Liberty Bowl last year, won the game as time expired with a field goal. And Navy goes to 1-1 and 1-0 in conference play. They now have 2 weeks off, or a week off again, because the Temple game was moved. And their next game is actually at Air Force to start the Commander-in-Chief's Trophy Series. But Air Force is in an interesting situation because as of right now, they're only playing 2 football games. They're only playing Army and Navy. And there's also been reports from their local paper out in Colorado Springs, that 40 of their players basically have dropped out of school for the semester so that they can come back in the spring and then graduate next December and use an extra year of eligibility when they're hoping they're going to be able to play a full season. So between that and only having 2 games, Navy has no film to prep for. They have no idea what kind of team they will be fielding because nobody knows which 40 players are the ones that dropped out or if that's even true. because Air Force hasn't commented at all on it. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of weeks leading up to that game on October 3rd out in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, that's an interesting story, especially because it's the academies, and I don't know how you could just drop out of one of the academies and like not miss anything and then just graduate early there. Like that's a very interesting report.
The
And if it's
rule is
true,
set up for if you get like an illness or get a injury that prevents you from going to school, and that's why the rule is there, so that if you're hospitalized for an extended period or broke your leg and you can't, which means you can't do the physical portion of the training, then you can drop out for a semester and then come back. But their coach, Troy Calhoun, tends to run his program more like a traditional big-time college program, like instead of the way the other two academies run it, which is a different program where you graduate in 4 years, you don't redshirt and any of that stuff. So it's just a different philosophy, but they're also very quiet about what they put out in the media. So it's hard to figure out what's going on in Colorado Springs.
yeah, it'll be a really interesting game. I remember Ken Niumatalolo said something interesting about how it shouldn't even count in the Commander Trophy, and there was a lot of bad press about that. And
he had to walk back comments because he brought the Pentagon into it, and then I'm sure either the superintendent of the academy or athletic director Chet Gladchuk got in his ear and said, don't. Because Bill Wagner, who covers Navy for the Annapolis Capital Gazette, actually talked about that he got a call after those statements were made on a Zoom call. He got a call from Coach Niumatalolo basically asking him to write an article walking back those comments. And Bill said that he made it seem like he had heard from somebody high up in the food chain that wasn't true, and he needed to walk that back.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with Air Force only playing 2 games against the 2 other academies. And I mean, of course, with the Mountain West Conference, postponing their season, it was kind of nothing else they could do because, they still want to play those games that they can. And
correct.
It's really
They're actually trying. Mountain West is actually trying to get their act together to play a season, but Air Force hasn't said they're going to play any more of the 2 games, probably because they lost those players. Hawaii is still under a 2-week quarantine that they're trying to negotiate with the state to get that waived so the teams can fly in and out of Hawaii. And Fresno State, being in California, was also under a quarantine in California, but they seem to have gotten that waived, so they're ready to go. But the other 2 are the holdouts right now.
Yeah, well, college football news this week, Big Ten is back, and I think it's October 24th is the first game. Then now it's only Pac-12 or the Power 5, and I heard something that the state of California had waived something to let USC and UCLA play in the Pac-12, and it was just the local jurisdictions about that. So maybe Fresno State would be able to play in the Mountain West, but Hawaii's got to do stuff, and it'll be interesting.
The other problem out there is the fires that are going on and the bad air quality. So that, especially with the 2 Oregon schools and the 2 Washington schools, so that's also a factor. So there's a lot going on out there.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that's all there is about college football. Like I said, Big Ten is back. It's all conference play. Maryland's got a really tough schedule. I think that's all we have for college football this week. For the NFL, both the Washington football team and Ravens played the 4:00 game this week, and they were almost pretty much opposite scores. The Ravens won 33-16 against the Texans, and Washington football team lost, I believe it was 30-15. Let me double check. Yes, 30-15. I'll start off talking about the Ravens game. I did not watch the game myself. I was doing the live tweeting over for the DC side of Maryland Sports Twitter account, so I wasn't able to watch the Ravens game. And just looking at the stat line, you'd think they would lose. Lamar Jackson, only 200 passing yards and 1 touchdown. Gus Edwards was their leading rusher with 73 yards. After that, it was Ingram with 55. Lamar only averaged 3.4 yards a carry. J.K. Dobbins had a couple explosive runs. I can tell he averaged 24 yards a carry on just 2 carries for 48 yards. But that stat line looks really bad. Obviously, they were able to win 33-16, and now they're 2-0, and things are looking good for the Ravens being 2-0. But the stat line is very interesting, and when I first saw it, I was very confused about how they won by so much, especially with only throwing for 204 yards and your leading rusher with only 73. Um, I was very surprised when I looked at the stat line, like I just said. Like I said, I didn't watch the game, so I don't really know that much about it. The Texans, on the other hand, Deshaun Watson struggled a bit. He only had 1 touchdown, and he did throw an interception. Their rushing was really bad. They only had 51 total carries, so 51 total yards. So I guess that the Ravens' rush defense was outstanding, as they have been this year. But I wasn't able to watch the game. I don't know that much, although I did watch the Washington football game, and that was really, really interesting to watch because 30-15 doesn't look great, and they were outscored 20-0 in the first half. Second half, they won 15-0. They won 15-10, and that's kind of the way it went last week against the Eagles. Second half, they've been a really good team. They've been able to adjust, but they just haven't come out of the gates early. Dwayne Haskins, 223 passing yards today, had 1 touchdown, no interceptions, but did fumble the ball at one point. He had an interesting game. He struggled really early. He did not play well, and he's given no time. Also, he had a couple of drops from his receivers that would have been big plays, but he's given no time. And that's the thing. It's if you put in Kyle Allen, what's the point? Because it's going to have the exact same thing happen. He's going to have no time. He has absolutely no weapons. The one weapon he has right now is Terry McLaurin, who went absolutely off. 7 receptions, 125 yards, and a touchdown. He's just insane. He is going to end up being a top 10 receiver in the league in a couple of years. Antonio Gibson had an okay day, 55 rushing yards on 13 attempts. He had a couple times where he was just about to break away. He had a couple of about 10-yard runs. He averaged about 4.2, and he did get his first career touchdown. But other than McLaurin, he has absolutely no weapons. Sims is not great. Logan Thomas dropped a couple passes. Inman as their number 2 receiver is just sad. He's really bad. They really need to pick up a receiver if they want to be good. The defense was good as always. You could say Kevin Pierre-Louis had 15 total tackles, 10 solo, which is something you like to see. Only 3 sacks, but when you're going up against a guy like Kyler Murray, you can't expect for that much more because he's just going to be so elusive in the pocket. Landon Collins had 1 nice interception that was then followed up by that unfortunate Haskins fumble, which, hurt their chances to win a lot. But Collins didn't have a great game. Arizona's first touchdown was pretty much 100% on Landon Collins. And I have 2 more things to say about the game. Steven Sims is awful as a returner. He fumbled on a punt return. The Arizona kicker, Zane Gonzalez, pretty much on every single kickoff landed it where Sims had to catch it inside the 5. And Sims maybe made it to the 20 once. He was absolutely horrific. He was 42 yards on 3 returns, averaged 14 with the longest of 20 yards, which is really bad. And he even got benched for the last punt return. He's got to go. They need someone to replace him. Trey Quinn was awful, but at least he's better than Steven Sims. Other than that, the refs were completely awful. The refs screwed up the game. In the very first drive, Tressway got hit really hard on a punt rush. Absolutely no call. They ended up calling a penalty on Washington, which was completely horrific. I cannot even believe that they still made that call. And the refs were really bad. I'm pretty sure it was the head ref's first ever NFL game or first year. He was really bad. Tressway, of course, though, really good. 3 punts inside the 20, had a 60-yard punt. But I've really been trying to look at the bright sides of the team because there are a lot of negatives. Next week's a big game. I think they can beat the Browns. It'll be interesting. The week after that, they have the Ravens. They're going to get absolutely murdered. They could not contain Kyler Murray with their secondary, as bad as it is. They're going to get destroyed by the Ravens. But the Browns, that should be an interesting game. I think they've got a chance to win. The rest of the NFC East isn't very good. The Eagles lost. The Giants lost. The Cowboys somehow won because the Atlanta Falcons are apparently the worst team in NFL history when it comes to blowing leads. I I was watching Red Zone the whole 1 o'clock window. I go over to watch the Washington football team, and I'm like, okay, Cowboys lost. All the teams are going to be 0-2. Even if Washington loses, they're still going to be top of the division. And then the Dallas Cowboys somehow win because the Atlanta Falcons looked like they were playing touch football. They allowed an onside kick because they basically forgot that you can touch the ball. And then the Cowboys ended up winning 40-39, and just very frustrating. We wanted Washington to be on the top of the division, but even then, they're still 1-1. The Eagles are awful. The Giants are awful. So there's going to be a lot of chances for Washington to win. It's still a developing team. I'd like to see them get a couple weapons. Brandon Sheriff got hurt. That's one thing that does not help. Jerron Christian is completely awful. I'd like to see Sadiq Charles get in there. Bryce Love could be back in a couple weeks. So there's definitely interesting things coming out. I think people's expectations, including mine, got too high after the Week 1 win. But people are getting really negative right now, and I think we need to all remember that it's a rebuilding team. It's not a team that we were expecting to be good. No one was expecting them to beat the Eagles Week 1. They ended up winning that game. They were projected to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. So let's be happy with what there is. And overall, not that bad. Let's see, any other news around sports? Bryson DeChambeau absolutely destroyed in the U.S. Open, won by 6 strokes, and he just played out absolutely amazing. Everyone else blew up. He was the only guy under par. Let's see other things. The NHL Finals started. The Stars, I believe, won Game 1. NBA are in the conference finals right now. The Heat are up 2-1, and the Lakers are up 1-0. And I think that's all the news there is around sports, unless you have anything else to mention, Brian.
I was just going to mention the injuries in the NFL today because they've been a little crazy.
Yeah.
San Francisco lost their running back, Raheem Mostert. They lost Jimmy Garoppolo. They lost Nick Bosa. Christian McCaffrey got hurt. Saquon Barkley got hurt. And the big things locally are the Skins losing Brandon Sheriff, and that will make the offensive line even worse. And the Ravens lost Tavon Young in their secondary for the year. And that's a problem because Mr. Mahomes and the Chiefs come to town for Monday Night Football next week. So you need all of your weapons healthy to contain Tyreek Hill and that bunch. So that's the big game next week is Monday Night Football, Chiefs at Ravens. And the Chiefs have beaten them 2 straight times, and that's like the one thing that the Ravens fans are looking forward to in the regular season is trying to avenge the losses to the Chiefs before the playoffs start, and then we see what if Lamar can shake his bugaboo in the playoffs.
But the injuries were absolutely insane. Saquon Barkley, from what I've heard, it looks like a torn ACL. Brandon Sheriff's injury here didn't seem too bad. From what I've heard, it's not season-ending. They need him back, though. And the injuries around the league, I thought injuries were going to happen Week 1. I was kind of surprised of how little there were, just because of no preseason. But this week was really bad. There were too many injuries. It was kind of sad to see because every single time I would check my phone and look on Twitter, there was another guy getting hurt, and it's not great. That's why you need a preseason, I think.
Everybody's fantasy waiver wires are going to be very popular this week.
Yeah, in the MSB Fantasy League, I'm pretty sure I'm getting absolutely destroyed right now because I was just completely dumb and forgot that George Kittle got hurt because he was hurt even before the week started, and there's just been so many injuries. It's insane, and luckily none of them are COVID related. The NFL's been 2 weeks clean without it, or at least without reporting any. But I think, everything's going well. 2 weeks is pretty good. I don't think the MLB's gone 2 weeks without a single outbreak, although they do travel a lot more. But still, that's pretty impressive considering they're not really in a bubble, but they're kind of in bubbles. It's interesting. But, yeah, I think that's all the news we have after just talking a bit about the NFL injuries, unless you have, like I said, anything else to say.
That's it.
All right, that's all. Thank you all so much for joining us on MSB Weekly. This week, I've been your host, Adam Gotkin, joined alongside Bryan Powell tonight. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you guys next week.